ends with Cypher. Prepare for another all-nighter.
On the Talk of Chicago, 1690 WVON.
So the Bears go to Detroit. I mean, it's a divisional game on the road. And they I put the majority of this on Cutler. You know, Jay Cutler was making some bad decisions out there. He had a horrible game.
3 interceptions, 1 fumble. Not good.
He usually has stinkers like this, at least one. I remember the game against Washington at Soldier Field. Was that last year or the year before where he threw like 4 picks? DeAndre Hall picked him off 4 times, I think. He had the game out in San Francisco when he first got here where he threw 5 picks. So he's good for at least one of those.
Every quarterback is going to have a crappy game. Let's just accept that. So let's just hope this is the last crappy game we're going to see from Jay Cutler for the rest of the season. Granted, nothing else was really working. I mean, he didn't help the situation. He kept putting them behind the 8 ball. They kept having too many 3-and-outs. They couldn't get first down conversions. When they got to third downs, that wasn't happening. I mean, they just weren't doing anything right. And Detroit was. And it's interesting because Detroit, I didn't think that Dalmas would have the kind of game that he had.
Yeah.
Because he was injured. Okay, he looked perfectly healthy to me. So, there were some things they could have exploited. I guess if you have to take something good from this game, and it's not, the score to me is not reflective of how bad the game was.
It's very cosmetic,
I think
score.
Detroit pretty much, just was like the clock run out. They happened to score. It is what it is. I don't think all of a sudden the Bears, something clicked and they played better, in the final 2 minutes of the game. That's not it. At least look at the offensive line had a rough going today, but they still didn't do too bad. Granted, this was their worst game because in their first 3 games, they'd only given up 3 sacks. They gave up 3 sacks in this game. Mm-hmm. So it was definitely rough for them. But I have to say, the right side where you've got Long and Mills, which are rookies, they didn't do bad against Sue. They really didn't do bad. So if nothing else, that was the one thing I thought was okay.
Wow, your glass is pretty half full. I wasn't expecting that from you. Honestly.
You have to pick, you got to pick something they managed to do right. I'm not saying that it was a stellar game, but for them to be rookies and to be going against the likes of Sue and Fairley, who I think this might be the best game I've seen them play in a long time, they did good. For what it's worth.
Oh, I agree. It was just with Cutler, I like what Tressman said, in the little open that we played. He's pretty much, we're going to stand pat. We're just going to, refine some things and come back and pretty much do what we've been doing. He doesn't sound like he's in panic mode at all, and that's a good thing. It's one game. It was a big divisional road game. Now Detroit is pretty much in first place because they hold the tiebreaker with the win.
Yes.
So, the Bears are going to have to clean up in the division now a little better. But it's not that big of a deal. You're not going to win every game. And I know they can't think like that. They're not thinking like that. But to me, this game wasn't that big of a deal. They went to Detroit. They hung in there. I think both teams wound up settling for a lot of field goals early in the game instead of scoring touchdowns. I think that kind of came back to bite the Bears. It looked like it was going to come back and bite Detroit. But they were able to start converting and start capitalizing on all of those Cutler mistakes that he was making out there. Wow, some of those throws.
And even defensively, just some of the tackles it wasn't good. And here's the thing, I know in Chicago they have grown accustomed to the takeaways that the defense gets every single game so far this year. Mm-hmm. And even last year, that was part of their character. You didn't see it in this game. Matter of fact, Detroit kind of did a better job at making it happen. So I'm not upset if the defense doesn't score because that's not technically their job. Their job is to keep the other team's offense off the board, which I think they did a really poor job of. And considering that, you looked at Reggie Bush was coming back. He had missed a game. He was nursing a knee injury. You didn't know how good he was going to be. They made him look like Adrian Peterson today, seriously, which is ridiculous. I'm not saying Reggie Bush is not a good running back, but the way he looked today, he looked like,
Barry Sanders.
He looked like Barry Sanders.
Yeah.
It's like ridiculous how he looked. All credit to Reggie. He had a good game. Not mad about it. It is what it is. But you would have thought being Calvin Johnson. Now, here's something else they did good. Pretty much, the Bears have done a great job in their at least 4 to 5 matchups with the Lions and kind of containing Calvin Johnson. Granted, he got a touchdown, but he didn't have big yardage this game. So that's something they still did well. But the problem was, and they did exactly what I thought they would do because we know that Burleson's out with a broken arm. I expected to see a little bit more from the tight ends, and you did. Pettigrew actually had a decent game. They kind of mixed in Scheffler here and there, not that much. But they compensated well to spread the field.
Yeah, Stafford worked that middle of the field pretty good, but if you saw the stats they flashed during the game, Johnson only averaged 53 yards a game last year, and he hasn't had really big games against the Bears in his career. So that wasn't that surprising that he didn't really get off. I think one of the things for Detroit, you were talking about tackling at the start of that, they tackled excellently today. If you look, earlier in the game when it was still relatively close, when Cutler would throw those dump-off passes to Forte or even the little short ones to Brandon Marshall, they were getting wrapped up immediately.
Yes.
Detroit tackled excellent today. Their tackling was excellent.
Detroit made a decision we're going to stack the box. Their pass rush was absolutely on point. Even when they tried to make the adjustment that has worked the last 3 games and putting them into, Cutler into a shotgun, they were still stacking the box and taking away the run, which means Cutler's only option was really to pass the ball. And he stunk at it today. So Detroit made all the appropriate adjustments. I mean, I love how they made the adjustment to the shotgun. I'm like, well, that's worked for 3 games straight. And they know that when the offensive line gets a little bit wobbly and kind of seems like they're losing the battle at the line of scrimmage, that tends to be the crutch that maybe they were using a bit to make it better. Detroit made the adjustment to that and took the run clearly away from how they stacked the box in that.
Yeah, they